What constitutes trauma? Frequently, trauma is used too broadly, assigned to situations that are challenging but not genuinely traumatic. While trauma is inherently stressful, not all stress qualifies as trauma. The liberal use of trauma can diminish its true meaning, particularly in critical areas like physical and mental health, fields we are deeply committed to. Trauma is often undervalued and underdiagnosed, leading to an oversight of its significance in various mental and physical health conditions. Trauma, originating from the Greek word for wound, refers to a psychological injury that leaves a lasting impression on one's nervous system, body, and psyche, often manifesting in harmful ways later in life. Essentially, trauma is akin to a psychological wound. A physical wound, when raw and unhealed, is highly sensitive, responding intensely to even minor stimuli. This parallels old, untreated psychological wounds that trigger strong reactions, especially in relationships. Similarly, as physical wounds scar, they become inflexible, a reflection of how trauma can lead to emotional stiffness and hinder emotional development. Intriguingly, scar tissue's insensitivity, due to the absence of nerve endings, mirrors how trauma can dull emotional reactions. Crucially, trauma is not the external event itself, but the internal injury caused by it. For example, trauma isn't the act of abuse, but rather the internal wound it creates. This viewpoint offers optimism, as unlike past events, the internal wounds caused by trauma are healable. The Hungarian concept of health, denoting wholeness, is aligned with this notion. Trauma disrupts our self-perception, severing our connection with our emotions and bodies. Hence, healing from trauma involves the reintegration of the self, restoring wholeness. This distinction is vital. Healing is more than the absence of physical ailment. It signifies the restoration and unification of a person no longer divided within. The belief that time heals all wounds is misleading. Wounds may remain dormant, only to be reactivated by a trigger. The term triggered refers to this phenomenon, where an old, unresolved wound resurfaces, evoking a response as intense as if the wound were new. Wounds we thought were in the past can resurface, reigniting torment. Time alone doesn't heal these wounds. It might mask them or push them out of conscious thought, but the pain lingers, poised to re-emerge with its original intensity when provoked. Healing demands active effort. It isn't a spontaneous or automatic process that simply occurs over time. Human vulnerability plays a crucial role in this context. The word vulnerability stems from the Latin vulnerare, meaning to wound. From birth to death, our inherent vulnerability is necessary for growth. Yet when childhood wounds render this vulnerability too painful, we often adopt defensive mechanisms, such as a perpetual need to be right, offering a semblance of power and invulnerability. However, these defenses also impede growth. Like a crab that must shed its shell to grow, we too must embrace our vulnerability for true development. Growth happens in the soft, vulnerable areas, not the hardened ones. Releasing childhood defenses is essential for embracing vulnerability and thus for authentic growth, often accompanied by growing pains. Without embracing vulnerability, genuine growth is unattainable. Children suffering from mistreatment, whether through abuse, domestic violence, addiction within the family, or during intense conflicts like a bitter divorce, extends beyond direct harm. Children's basic needs, when unmet, can inflict significant damage. To comprehend human development, we must consider evolutionary needs. Children are not mere blank slates, tabula rasa. They arrive with innate needs and expectations molded by evolution. For example, a child's need for oxygen is paralleled by their inherent need for specific emotional and social conditions. Children require unconditional love and acceptance from multiple caregivers, a need rooted in our history as hunter-gatherers. They shouldn't have to struggle to maintain their relationship with their parents. A child's worth and acceptance should not depend on being pretty, smart, or successful. They need to be valued for their mere existence. Additionally, children have the right to experience and express all their emotions. Modern parenting often encourages the suppression of certain emotions, potentially leading to developmental issues and health problems later in life. Another fundamental need is the freedom for spontaneous creative play in nature. Far from just a leisure activity, this play is vital for healthy brain development, as seen in various animal species, from bear to lion cubs. Today's emphasis on cognitive development over play, coupled with the growing dependency on gadgets, deprives children of essential developmental experiences. Thus, the harm to children goes beyond direct mistreatment. It includes the failure to fulfill these essential needs, a failure increasingly common in today's society. This neglect contributes to escalating issues among children, such as anxiety, ADHD, depression, and even suicide. The issue is not a lack of parental love, but rather the challenging conditions under which parenting occurs in modern society. Individuals who reject societal norms often approach life differently, particularly regarding employment. They seek jobs not for self-identification or societal validation, but simply as a means to an end. Their self-worth is not anchored in external markers of success, as they do not internalize society's imposed values. These individuals possess a deep sense of purpose, stemming from a connection with their authentic selves, enabling them to live in the world without being consumed by its materialistic and superficial values. Additionally, the notion of shielding children from pain, often driven by parental anxieties rather than the child's needs, can lead to children inheriting these anxieties, resulting in fear and emotional instability. It's important to differentiate between overprotectiveness and genuine love. Studies have shown that children who receive abundant love and affection, free from the burden of parental anxieties, grow up more emotionally stable and grounded. An intriguing historical example is the Buddha, sheltered from suffering by his parents. Yet, he ultimately confronted the realities of pain and suffering, demonstrating that overprotection cannot fully shield one from life's inherent vulnerabilities. The Buddha's own trauma of losing his mother shortly after birth is often overlooked, highlighting that overprotection cannot prevent every hardship. In essence, spoiling a child often addresses the unmet needs of the parents rather than the child's. When parents project their anxieties and needs onto their child, they fail to see the child for who they truly are, ultimately causing harm. Life naturally encompasses pain and challenges. Children will inevitably encounter disappointments and losses, such as the death of a loved one or unfulfilled desires. The key is not to deliberately expose them to pain, but to support them through these experiences. It's about assisting them in processing and moving past the pain rather than preparing them for hardship. The focus should be on our interaction and support during their moments of pain. Grieving is an intrinsic part of existence. As individuals confront loss, comprehending the essential steps in the grieving process is critical for everyone, not just children. Our brains are equipped with neural pathways for experiencing grief and panic, akin to those for joy and love, underscoring that loss is an unavoidable aspect of life. Grief is essentially the journey of reconciling with the permanent absence of someone or something dear. When children grieve, it's imperative to validate and recognize their emotions, irrespective of the loss's apparent significance from an adult's perspective. What may seem trivial to an adult can profoundly impact a child. The aim is not to trivialize their feelings or to draw comparisons with others' pain, but to empathize and acknowledge their distress. In doing so, we aid them in accepting their loss and navigating through it, teaching them to endure challenging emotions without being overwhelmed. Our brain's mechanisms for processing grief are designed to help us manage these feelings. Activating and working through these grief circuits is not solely about recovering from the loss. It's also about learning to endure and grow through life's inevitable hardships. When it comes to exploring one's past, the notion of should is often inappropriate, as delving into past experiences can be intrusive and must be relevant to the individual's current state. The enduring impact of trauma frequently results in past wounds re-emerging in the present. Therefore, the emphasis should not be on lingering over past events, but rather on understanding and addressing how these experiences manifest in the present. This dynamic, often termed as the tyranny of the past, significantly influences our current reactions more than we might realize. Simply reflecting on past traumas is not enough for healing. The key is to confront the emotions that surface in the present, influenced by past events, and comprehend their effect on our current life. There is a danger, however, in individuals becoming excessively identified with their past traumas. Some may adopt a victim mindset, believing that their past irrevocably dictates their present and future potential. Others may identify too strongly with being a survivor, viewing their identity exclusively through the lens of past challenges. While surviving is part of one's narrative, it should not encompass the entirety of one's identity. People are much more than their experiences of suffering or their stories of survival. Over-identifying with past hardships can impede progress and personal growth. The objective is to recognize the past's influence without allowing it to overshadow or define our entire existence. Exploring the concept of identification unveils its constraints. The term stems from the Latin idem, meaning the same, and facere, meaning to make. When we identify with something, such as a professional role or a personal experience, we effectively confine our identity to that aspect, losing sight of our broader, complex identities. Hence, identification inherently limits us. It does not allow for a diverse, expansive self-concept. Although humans have a natural desire for belonging, true belonging should not necessitate the loss of our individual perspective or authenticity. The challenge lies in harmonizing our need for connection and belonging with preserving our authentic selves. It's feasible to feel connected to a community, nation, or group, and to harbor loyalty and affection for it without letting that association define our entire identity. When identification becomes so overpowering that it erodes our independent self, it often leads to distress. This parallels what Buddhism identifies as unhealthy attachment. Thus, when pondering the concept of healthy identification, it's more sensible to question how we can connect and belong without sacrificing our individuality and authenticity. Can we maintain a self-identity that is part of something larger, yet remains distinct and independent? Achieving this balance enables us to belong authentically, free from the constraints of rigid identification. Why do we gravitate towards familiarity and resist change? Often, this inclination traces back to childhood experiences. For instance, if a child's emotional needs are not fully met by their caregivers, they might develop a self-protective mindset. This mindset, or the ordinary egoic human mind, primarily functions as a defense mechanism. Largely, it evolves in response to pain, aiming to protect the individual from further emotional harm. This defensive nature of the mind is marked by worry, anxiety, and a constant vigilance against potential threats, including change and vulnerability. It originates from fear, rooted in early experiences of pain that were not adequately addressed or soothed. Consequently, we form mental structures intended to shield us from re-experiencing similar pains. There's a profound discomfort that can arise from merely being oneself, particularly if it involves facing unresolved issues or vulnerabilities. The mind, in its protective efforts, accumulates layers of beliefs, desires, and artificial needs. These mental constructs serve as a barrier against the discomfort of authenticity. Discarding these defenses can feel like reverting to a state of helplessness, reminiscent of a vulnerable child. The mind, predominantly defensive, often responds negatively to the prospect of change, clinging to familiar patterns, even if they are restrictive or unhealthy. Loneliness is a subjective experience, distinct from the objective state of being alone. Being alone is a physical state, which can be chosen or changed. Loneliness, however, carries emotional significance and is deeply influenced by one's perceptions. It's possible to be physically alone without feeling lonely, just as it's possible to feel profoundly lonely amidst a crowd. This differentiation hinges on personal openness and vulnerability, as well as the defensive barriers we might erect that hinder genuine connections with others. Often, loneliness results from these self-imposed defenses. Furthermore, societal factors significantly influence the experience of loneliness. Our culture frequently emphasizes economic value, leading to the marginalization of those who don't align with the roles of producers or consumers, like the elderly. In this context, the terms elderly and elders are not interchangeable. In a more functional society, elders are valued for their wisdom, experience, and detachment from youthful passions. They are considered integral community members, whereas in our materialistic society, they are often marginalized or undervalued. Loneliness is also intensified by the societal trend of segregating people by age. Many individuals limit their interactions to their age group, which hampers personal development. Historically, humans have flourished in multi-generational communities, benefiting from the diverse perspectives and experiences of various age groups. Our contemporary tendency to isolate ourselves within specific age groups restricts our development and potential for broader, more meaningful connections. This isolation, driven by superficial age-related identifications, significantly contributes to the widespread feeling of loneliness in our society. The term spirituality is frequently used ambiguously, with its meaning varying greatly among individuals. For clarity, it's best to interpret it in personal terms. Connection doesn't entirely encapsulate its essence. A better approach might be to focus on the concept of unity. This sense of unity extends beyond merely feeling connected to the surrounding world, the grass, trees, mountains, and wildlife. It encompasses a profound alignment with the entirety of existence, transcending the physical confines of our bodies and the limitations of our ego-driven minds. Spirituality, in its truest sense, involves feeling part of something vast and indefinable, a connection that transcends the superficial aspects of life. It's not merely about our emotions, physical existence, social interactions, or even our individual spiritual journeys. To achieve true wholeness, we need to find balance in all these aspects, including the spiritual dimension. This spiritual aspect is fundamental to our existence. yet its representation can vary greatly among individuals. For some, it might be rooted in a specific tradition or belief system, while for others, it's a personal journey of exploration. Ultimately, spirituality is about discovering that essential element that connects us to the greater whole, in whatever form it may manifest for each person. Don't await validation or recognition from external authorities like governments or broader society, as such acknowledgement may be delayed or never arrive. Instead, it's imperative to recognize and accept your own pain and suffering. This self-acknowledgement is the initial step towards healing. Rather than focusing on the pain, shift your attention to the innate wisdom and healing capabilities within cultures, societies, and, most importantly, within yourself. This inner wisdom is crucial for overcoming and healing from your challenges. Depending on external validation for your healing journey relinquishes your well-being to others, a course that is not only unreliable but also disempowering. True healing commences with self-recognition and tapping into the internal resources you possess for recovery and growth.